Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's so wonderful to be back here again and see each one of you in person. Zoom calls are fine, but nothing like meeting in person. So a very, very warm welcome to each one of you, and thank you for making the time to come here. So on behalf of the Catholic Club,
you can hear? Oh, now the voice has gone off. Now it's gone off.
So on behalf of the Catholic Club Ibrowse subcommittee, I extend a warm welcome to each one of you and a special welcome to our author of the evening, the multi-talented Sunitha Srinivasan. So we have a wonderful program lined up for you. Our moderators for the evening are Caroline Lobo and Gavin Cordero. So Caroline is a lawyer by profession, an avid reader, and a mother to two dynamic young boys. Gavin Cordero is also extremely dynamic in his own words. He says he's a notorious member of this club, but he is one of the founding members of the Ibrowse. So a big warm welcome to our moderators of the evening. Can we have you up on the stage, please? Sunitha, Gavin, Caroline. We start off with Tessa Ramparam, who will introduce the author.
I'd like to introduce Sunitha Srinivasan. Sunitha Srinivasan started writing when she was 8 years old. She's always been interested in times gone by and previously chronicled the history of the Nilgiris. Her articles have been published in the Indian Express, the Hindu, and the Illustrated Weekly of India. Trailblazers of the Travancore Plantations is her first book. Sunitha grew up on an estate in central Travancore. Besides being an author, Sunitha has over 30 years of retail experience that spans over every facet of business. She also runs a chemical factory which manufactures eco-friendly biodegradable cleaners. So I welcome you, Sunitha, on behalf of the Ibrowse Book Club, Catholic Club.
Before we start, a small request that everyone can put their mobiles on silent mode. It would be very nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Tess. It's very special that she introduced me. You all can hear me, right? Okay, so is this better? Yeah, okay. So it's very special that Tess introduced me simply because her uncle is one of the people who's given me two pictures which we've used in the book. And we just found out about that 10 minutes ago. So that's really incredible. Thank you, Tess. The Trailblazers of the Travancore Plantations is a historical narrative that was published by DC Books. It was released in August 2021. And it tells the story of the Idukki district in Kerala. Now, this is a district that has undergone tremendous transformation in the last 100 years. It's gone from impenetrable jungle to a bustling plantation district. Surprisingly, or maybe not so surprisingly, not much has been recorded about this region, perhaps because the people who were achieving things there were just too busy to make records. Either ways, as the district changes even further into a hub of tourism and movie making, unless an effort is made to record the achievements of the people who actually contributed to its development, they will tend to be forgotten, your uncle being one of them. This book is a humble attempt to record these achievements. It's also a somewhat nostalgic read about a way of life, a gracious way of life that the world will never see again, of people who worked hard and played hard. Tea planters who ended up in tea bushes after a good night at the club. Dogs who retrieved Easter eggs. The construction of one of the first ropeways in the country, which ended up in disaster. One of the first experiments in the manufacture of green tea. And of course, no account of this region would be complete without speaking about the contribution of the royal family of Travancore. They were the original owners of this region. I'm extremely fortunate and privileged to be speaking to all of you today. And Samira, thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's a complete pleasure being here. And now I think I need to hand over to my very able moderators.
Thank you, Sunitha, for that. You've given a beautiful description of the book, and like I told you earlier, I enjoyed reading it. So I think everyone present here today should get a copy of this book. It's available here with Rohini.
Let me interrupt. Has anyone here read the book already?
That's a good question.
Okay, so 2 people here. If they ask any questions on the book, you're not allowed to answer.
Actually 4, but 2 don't count.
So there's lots of things about the book, in the book, that I want to talk to you about or ask you a lot of questions actually. But one of the main things is how you brought these characters to life actually. It really took me back. And of course, I'm not from Kerala. I'm not born in that era. Not that I'm very old, very young. But I want to know where did you get all this research work from?
Okay, that's actually a spectacular question. Simply because, like I said, not much has been recorded about this region. So pretty much the only recorded history of this region was made by a lady called Heather Lovett, the wife of one of the tea planters in the region in the 1970s. She was an Oxford scholar who wrote this tiny little cyclo-styled book called A Short History of the Pyramid Bandiperiya District. And this was sold to people who lived there for 10 rupees. I still have a copy of that book, and that was a primary source of research. Then there was this gentleman called Mr. Pigott, who came from Sri Lanka to advise the tea planters in the region on how to improve their manufacturing technique. In 1943, he wrote his memories, which he submitted to the Planting Association there. And what is incredible is that he wrote them in the form of letters. And by the end of his life, this man was in such bad economical situation that he couldn't afford a pen. He wrote those letters in pencil, and people were able to put together his history from that. I've seen those letters. They're incredible. The planting associations have always been a very good source of information. In fact, if you've noticed in the book, there's this beautiful map of central Travancore, which Hubert has beautifully restored. Now, this came from a planting directory of 1956. But having said that, secondary research besides, my major source of information was primary research. I've interviewed over 100 people to write this book, which has been very big fun because it meant connecting and reconnecting with people who I knew as a child. One of them being Mrs. Nirmala Mathan, whose father was a wonderful doctor in the region and whom I have written about. Nirmala is joining us virtually, and maybe she can speak a few words about her father.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Sunitha. I'm Nirmala Mathan. I'm the daughter of Major General P.T. Joseph, the doctor, the brilliant surgeon. My father was invited to join MMT Hospital when in the early days, like the late 1969, I think it, no, like 1960. What was it? 69. No, 1969, yes.
Late
Yes.
1960s.
Yes. So, yes, Mr. George Thomas Kotarapalli, who was a very well-known planter and businessman, and who was an MP in Delhi in those days, came to know my father. In fact, he consulted him, even though he was a civilian. You know, my father was an army officer, but he was such a brilliant surgeon that many, many civilians came to him for advice, and he even operated on many of them throughout his career. With special permission, they were operated in the military hospital wherever he was. Anyway, my father retired as consultant surgeon to the armed forces and honorary surgeon to the president. He'd had a brilliant career, and he had a few offers, one from WHO, I remember, but George Thomas Kotarapalli persuaded him to accept this offer to come and work in MMT Hospital. The nuns were there at that time, and so he did. And it was really a fledgling organization at that time. I believe it's grown into a multi-specialty hospital today, many, many years later. We have happy memories of the nuns, and during our summer holidays, we used to go down, and we had happy memories. But my father, I think, had a lot to struggle with in the beginning, because he was used to the best of instruments and the best of theater sisters and anesthetists and all that. Can you hear me? I don't know if you can hear me.
It's faint. Maybe you can speak up a little bit.
Sorry? What is
Could
it?
you speak up a little bit?
Ask if she could.
I can't hear what you're saying.
It's
Sunitha,
okay. It's okay. Don't worry.
talk louder or softer? Am I too loud?
No, perfect. Perfect.
No, tell me if I'm too loud. Am I too loud for you? I don't know what you're saying. Anyway, since we're talking of olden times, like the 60s, 70s, I must tell you that in the MMT people, I don't think had any idea what a great man he was when he came. But this great man who was a brilliant surgeon and had a brilliant career and had all these awards, Ati Vishishta Seva Medal and the Param Vishishta Seva Medal, and new presidents and kings and prime ministers and all the rest of it. He had a lot of humility. He was humble, and the patients loved him, adored him. The nuns were very fond of him and respected him. That's what I remember. You know, in the beginning, he had such a tough time one incident I must tell you, he himself told me that in the very when he came, there was no proper anesthetist. He was a surgeon. He was a general surgeon with special interest in orthopedics. He did all kinds of surgery, especially those days, a lot of pioneering surgery. And his anesthetist at that time was a dentist who had done some sort of training in anesthesiology. And my father told me once, he said, you know, he had 9 cardiac arrests on the table due to faulty anesthesia. But by the grace of God, they were all saved. Nobody died. That's the grace of God, you know. Anyway, talking about happy memories, I remember Sister Magdalene, who was the director, and Sister Felix. Now, Sister Felix, when she came like Mary Poppins almost, because once she arrived, he had a very good anesthetist. You know, she was a full-fledged anesthesiologist, so life improved. Then what else? I remember some of his patients, Billy Armstrong, who was they used to call him Billy Bunter because he was a big fat man, but a very jolly man. I remember Mr. and Mrs. Srinivasan, Pat Srinivasan, who Sunitha's mother. Sunitha was a little girl at that time. And what else? Yes, another happy memory I have is Pat, who played the piano, asked me to sing at the Pyramid. I think it was a Pyramid CSI church. And my children also sing, you know, my son and daughter also sing. And she asked my little girl also to sing. I sang the Ave Maria, and Punima sang The Little Drummer Boy. These are happy memories that I have. My father worked there for almost 9 years. And then we all said, it's time to call it a day. My mother died a few years earlier after a long illness. So that was that. So thank you very much, Sunitha.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Nirmala Matan, I must tell you that out of the 13 stories, your father's story was my favorite.
Oh, how nice. Thank you. You know, he would have told
Really
you wonderful
great person,
stories.
I think, really.
He would have told you wonderful stories because he was in the war in the early days. You know, after his London FRCS, he joined the Imperial Medical Service. That was IMS. You know, like the ICS, it was a very prestigious service. And I remember, he told me he was in Palestine during the war, and he also Kohat. Kohat is now in Pakistan. And one incident I remember, which will interest you, you all heard of the famous German General Rommel. Once in their medical camp, I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me? You can hear me? Once in their medical camp.
Yes, we can hear you.
You can? Okay.
Yes.
Rommel, by mistake, he mistook the the Allied camp for one of theirs because of the cross on top or some such thing. And suddenly they saw this man getting out of his helicopter or whatever and walking with his baton, waving his baton and coming forward. And suddenly he realized he was in the wrong place. And all these people recognized him and they all admired him, even though he was their enemy. And he turned back and went back. So my father was in that camp at that time. That's a wonderful story for us to remember now. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Now you got a little background about the research. If you have a look at the book, you'll find a lot of pictures in the book. Now, getting pictures of that era, I can't figure out how you managed it. Can you tell us something about the photographs and how you got them and how they are so clear? They look like they've been restored. You got a
Yes.
smug smile. There's some story behind that. I think I walked into something.
Okay, so the pictures were given to me by the descendants of the Trailblazers. To start with, Tess's uncle gave me two. And the picture that's on the cover is absolutely phenomenal because this was a wedding that took place in one of the clubs in the 1950s of a Scottish couple. No one knows who they were. But what we do know is that 4 of the people I've written about in the book were part of the audience. Now, this is something that's absolutely phenomenal because it's a very old picture. And so obviously the person who shared it with me was not willing to take it out of the album. He was not willing to email it, nothing. So from a distance, he took a photograph on his camera and sent it to me. And then there's this gentleman here, Hubert Rylard, who restored this picture and all the others in the book. Now, we need to ask him how he did it because he's a genius, absolute genius.
This
My
is
God,
Hubert.
so polite words about me. I have to forward this message to my wife tonight. So a few words about myself. I very much belong to Bangalore because I'm a pensioner. So earlier Bangalore was the pensioner city of India, I believe. So I live in the city since 1996 and was running a medium business from Germany. By profession, I'm an electronic engineer, and my hobby is photography. So when Sunitha informed me about this project and showed me the pictures, I was pretty excited for 2 reasons. One is, I think her book is very interesting because it's not a typical history book or something. History books are also important, but these are more the stories of individuals, which often get lost in history. And if she would not have written this book now, maybe in 20 years, we would not get to know about these highly interesting stories. That is one thing. And the second thing is, this is backed up normally by photography. So photography is a good medium to, let's say, throw light a little more on these characters by the pictures. So Sunitha mentioned this this book, this picture in around the book, and I think the publisher had a good idea because the full picture you will see when you open the book. So it's one picture. And at the beginning, we didn't have this idea. If you put this picture on one page, it's not a good idea because it's very wide. So if you compress it and have nothing on top, so it would be a meaningless picture because the content is here and the rest is only trees. So it would not be a very meaningful to compress this, and you would not see the faces anymore. So he had the idea to put it around the book, and I think that saved the picture. That makes it very nice, and we can even identify people on this. Actually, to restore this picture is not a very artistic job. And maybe many may link Photoshop to a software where you manipulate pictures. But here your task is to reproduce them in a way that they give an idea how they look like when they were originally taken. So many of them have scratches, they get a brown color. And the old pictures, the oldest picture I own is from my grandmother from 1890. And these pictures are not that old, but also pretty old. They become gray. The chemicals in these papers are still working, so they have funny effects that the people look a little different compared to the time when the picture was taken. So you do this mainly with Photoshop with the intention to restore them. And it was done in, of course, all this is analog technology. So there was no digital. So when I was invited to say a few words here, I had no idea about the average age of the audience. But just for the fun of it, I don't know which people, what cameras they used. But this is a typical camera. It's around 60 years old. So this was originally the Rolls-Royce of cameras in Europe, at least. A Swedish company, not German. So it's called Hasselblad. Okay. So it's a 60-year-old camera. So at that time, when I was young, I could not afford this camera. So this is roughly the price of, I would say, a i30 from Hyundai or something like that. So at that time, there was no way. If you want such a camera, there are 6 of these cameras on the moon. So it's of course a long journey. But when I came to Bangalore, we had an office boy. And sometimes people ask him, what is your name? And then he said, who was the first man on the moon? Then people said Armstrong. And then he said, that is my name. And these people left 6 of these cameras on the moon because they were not sure how to come back to Earth. So they didn't want extra weight. So if these cameras are very funny. I open it for you just to give you an idea. You can see the back here, you have the film. And then you can sorry, this is not directly linked to the book. Why I'm doing this? I think this analog photography has something because in this way you have 12 pictures. So you had to think what you're doing. And you didn't see the picture immediately, so you have to think much more again. So, and when I was young, there were some iconic pictures which have changed the history, I would say. So one, maybe I'm not sure about what kind of images that were in India, but in Europe, it was this girl in Vietnam who was running away from this napalm. I think that turned that war, and all people said enough is enough. Then we had also that officer from the South Vietnamese army who shot that fellow directly in the head in front of the camera. So what I wanted to say, there are many iconic pictures related to analog photography. Now I have no picture in mind which has the same influence in the digital area. Because every day, I think there are maybe 5 billion pictures per day, so it has not the same thing. So come to an end, I think for me it was a great fun to be a small part in this project by restoring the pictures. And as I said, the tools are basically digital tools. For analog pictures, you could not renovate this picture manually. It would be a hell of a lot of work. But with the computer, it's not so, it's not that complicated, but it was nice to be a part of this project. And I'm also relatively happy regarding the picture with the outcome. So thank you.
Thank you, Hubert. Thanks a million.
Thank you, Hubert. Thank you for that. A picture speaks 1,000 words, right? But we have 13 stories in this book. If I may ask, which one is your favorite?
That's a hard one.
All of us have our favorite child. We don't actually speak about it. It's quite a secret. So
I don't.
I'm sure you two
You
do.
don't.
You don't?
So let's
course.
first ask Gavin, which is his favorite story, and then go from
Yes.
there.
Okay, I won't tell you which my favorite story is, but you can figure it out. What I'm going to do, I'm going to ask them something, and I'll come to the story. Okay? We all know churches have names, right? Yes, no? Huh? Can you tell me some church's name, Samira? Any name, any name. She thinks of the closest one, St. Patrick's. Okay, any exotic names you all have heard of? Like in Indiranagar, there's a church called Foursquare Church. I was quite surprised because Foursquare is a brand of cigarettes. Anything else like that? Any exotic name?
St. Francis.
Those are the common names.
Methodist Church.
Methodist Church.
That's called Redeemed Christian Church.
Okay, Redeemed Christian Church. But I'm sure none of you would have heard of a church called Lucifer Church. Can you believe it? Lucifer Church. Lucifer is a blooming disgraced angel, the devil. A church named after him. Let's ask our author to tell us about this church and the story behind it. That was my fun story.
That will make one story. So, like a lot of Kerala, this district also is predominantly Christian. And on the estate where I grew up, we had two churches, one of which was St. Andrew's Church. Now, even when I was a child, St. Andrew's had fallen into complete disrepair. It was maintained, but it wasn't in very great shape. And then Mohan Lal decided to film the movie Lucifer. And have any of you seen that movie? Okay, so you know the place, the ashram kind of, and that church where he sits, as well as the factory where there's that big fight. Now, all of this were on the estate where I grew up. And the church was St. Andrew's Church, which he restored for the movie. And since Lucifer was shot there, St. Andrew's got called Lucifer Church. It's now a major tourist attraction.
Now you know why I like that story. It's very interesting how you can have a church with the name of the devil, right? Anyway. So, yeah. go
Your
ahead.
favorite book, Gavin.
Huh?
Your favorite
Your
Yeah,
favorite
nothing to do with the
I
book.
enjoyed that one.
Oh,
You
that's
like
the
that one?
That's why I
okay.
Yeah,
No,
I
no.
love that one too, because it's about dogs.
Yeah.
So for me, that was special.
You in the Eyebrows group, you had mentioned something about a little bit about green tea. Now, that's a very integral part of your book. Maybe you can share something about that.
Gavin,
With the
if I
crowd.
tell all the stories.
Just teasers, just give them teasers.
Okay, so basically, one of the first experiments in the manufacture of green tea in the country took place in this district. It was working with the Japanese. As it happens, the experiment failed, probably because it was way before its time, which is why no one really knows about it.
Okay, why did the experiment fail? Don't tell them.
Okay.
Let them buy the book and find out why.
Okay.
Now we do it that way.
So I won't read one of my favorite lines from the book then, because I'll leave it to the audience to buy the book and read it. But I'm sure many of you all will, like They Broke the Mold. You must read that story. And it's very interesting, actually, how it ends. We know that the estates were there and, they were well taken care of back in the day. Now you visited the place also anytime, you've seen it now.
Yes.
So what is the state of, particularly the two estates that are there?
They're not in very great shape. Unfortunately, the current management have had a lot of problem with the labor, and in fact, cannot even enter the estate. Having said that, the tea itself has been divided among the workers who pluck the leaf and give it to bottle factories in the region. The bungalows have fallen into disrepair because people can't enter it. In fact, when we went, Hubert made some very beautiful pictures of it. And the factory where the green tea experiment happened is actually the factory that was in the Lucifer movie. And it's what Samira put up on the group today. As you can see, it's in terrible shape. So it's not a very good story.
Okay, then I'll tell them a good story.
Yes, you tell a good
Okay,
story.
I'm going to tell you all a story. It's actually a little joke, but there was this gentleman in a bar, and he sat at the bar and he told everyone, okay, who wants to take a bet with me that I can bite my eye? They all said, bite your eye? Okay, all of them put $10 on the table, and there's no way a man can bite his eye. He took out the glass eye and bit it. So everyone says, okay, he got all the money. Then he says, $20 on the table from each of you if I can bite my other eye. So, I mean, they looked at him. Obviously, he didn't have two glass eyes. So they all took the bet. This time he took out his dentures and bit the other eye. But the reason I'm telling you this story, that little joke, is because there is a story in this book where they talk about Dore's eye, right?
Yes.
Should we tell them about that story or let them read about it?
No.
I think that they need to, just a bit,
Okay,
why it's
tell,
called
tell,
Dore's
tell.
eye.
You tell. Your favorite
book,
story.
your book.
So basically, it's about this Scottish gentleman who had lost one of his eyes in the war, and how he had made it a party trick to kind of remove the glass eye and replace it. That's one part of it. But more important, how he used his eye as literally a remote surveillance camera. It's phenomenal. Yes.
You've got to read about it. You can't describe it unless you read it. Yeah.
Sunitha, your book is all about Kerala. You said you were raised there, your parents were from there. But somewhere I heard that you're not actually a Malayali.
No, I'm not.
No. What is this attachment? And after all these years, what made you write this book?
So another planter told me this thing that sounded really nice, that, so especially in those days, it wasn't a situation where you could visit other, the rest of your family frequently or anything like that. So the people on the estate became your family for sure. And your estate bungalow was what we would call in Malayalam your taravad, your family home. So for me, this bungalow was my taravad. I mean, home of your heart. So when you want to write about something, that's where you want to write. In fact, I'm writing another book on Kerala.
That was my next question,
Sorry,
actually.
Caroline, sorry.
That's fine.
That's always a question. When's your next book coming out?
When is a question, but yeah, okay.
Anyone in the audience would like some questions? Sorry, we are hogging the show here. If there's anyone who'd like to ask some questions. They haven't read the book, and I told the two who've read it, they're not allowed to ask questions. But please do, those of you who've read it. Okay. But if there are no questions, just something I'd like to touch on. In the foreword, this book is described. It's not a book of short stories. It's not a book of a historical book. It is a series of word pictures. I love that description of the book. And if you read the book, you'll know why it's called a series of word pictures. I'll just give you some example. Just imagine these things. A placard on a cow's grave with the name Kamala. A dead goldfish being preserved in a fridge. I mean, the first time a bungalow was made into a morgue. The dining room chairs were made of cane, perfect for sticking the prongs of a fork upward in them. Imagine the visual pictures. And there are a lot more of that. So I think I'm doing a good job of selling your book, right?
Very good, Gavin. Thank you.
So, a series of word pictures is what this book is, and it's really an enjoyable read. You just have to pick it up. So, it's not a very fat book, so it's an enjoyable time. Anyway, sorry, over to you all. Any questions?
Yes.
You say, finish it. No one said anything, so you must say.
So no questions. So you'd like us to do all the talking. Okay, then with that, then we'll hand it over back to you, Shanti. First, thank you so much, Sunitha, for being with us today.
Sunitha. Thank you.
And for a
Thank
nice
you.
evening. Yeah, come.
It is a very, very interesting, I mean, the writing style itself, she's really like the gentleman said, she's brought out the feeling and you can actually imagine it all happening in front of your very eyes. And it's such a wonderful feeling for some of us who are nostalgic about the old times, want to go back to the graceful life, as she said. And it's so kind of, it just takes you back and it's such a feel good at the end of the book. I mean, through the book and at the end of the book. I think I just went through it in one sitting because I just couldn't put it down and wanted to go back to that whole feeling of, just that warmth enveloping you in the good old days when your neighbors, you could just walk into their houses and feel good about, your parents know you're just there and, that kind of a lifestyle. Wonderful book, Sunitha. I really loved it and can't wait for the next one.
Thank you. Thank you
I
so
got to
much.
ask you a question now. You said you read it in one sitting. How long did you take?
Read it through from morning to maybe the next, I mean, of course, I managed my nap times in between.
No, I just wanted to boast a little. I finished the book in 45 minutes, one sitting.
Good for you. No, I really
It's
enjoyed
unputdownable.
enjoyed it.
It's unputdownable. It's really enjoyable. Yeah.
Completely.
So
Yes.
thank you once
Thank
again.
you. Thank you,
you.
Sunitha.
Thank you so much.
Good writing is remembering detail. Most people want to, good writing is remembering detail most people want to forget. But a good writer resonates true details. Here is a beautiful attempt to recollect the past experiments in the manufacture of tea, the royal family of Travancore, and the lives lived. All the exhaustive research has translated well into this beautiful book. On behalf of the Ibrowse Book Club, we'd like to congratulate you, Sunitha, on this wonderful book. May I now request Shanti to hand over a gift, a token of appreciation to Sunitha, please. And to our wonderful moderators as well, Shanti, to Carol and to Gavin. Thank you for keeping us engaged. We would also like to thank Mr. Hubert. Thank you. Please join us on stage. May I request the subcommittee to come on stage for a photograph?
It's over. I don't have to be here.
Okay, we hope you'll enjoy the evening as much as we did getting it to you. Anyway, just one small confession. Believe it or not, where's she gone? Caroline and I read this book just 2 days ago. And we hope we've done justice to it this evening. Thank you. Can we have everyone coming up for a group photograph? It would be nice. So we can preserve the memories without asking Hubert to redo them tomorrow. And Nirmala Madam, thank you so much
Photograph.
also. And Nirmala, thank you also for joining us today. It was really nice to hear from you. We'd have loved to have had you here, but still you are with us virtually. Thank you again.
Thank you. Quite a few people.
For the photograph, for about 5 seconds, can you take your mask? I took my out now. Just for the photograph.
Sure. Seems to be. Thank you, Mane. Thanks a lot. Couldn't have done it without you. Yeah, I'm so tired now.
Oh, hey, I'm glad everything went off okay.
Yeah.
You could hear, they could hear you, everything fine. Oh.
Morning.